I'm Dr. Cynthia Elise Smith, and the doctor is in. Hi there. I'm here today to talk about racism, as usual. But my inspiration for this is the fact that people still do not understand what racism really is. And I understand why. The very definitions provided to us are misleading and misrepresentative of what racism is. And it is not by happenstance, it is on purpose. It's on purpose. And there's a reason why it's done. I mean, these definitions exist on purpose. But before I begin, I'm just going to go over some of the things that I do that I call my housekeeping, and that is to explain who I am and what I do. My name is Dr. Cynthia Elise Smith, and I'm an anti racism, anti white supremacism educator and essayist specializing in essays and presentations with alternative views on race, race as color, race as character, racism, and white supremacy. These are all different subjects. I offer deeper, more critical perspectives on these subjects, including the potential implications of racialized wording in the U.S. language lexicon that are not ordinarily considered. And I always say, I'm not here to change your mind, but I'm here to make you critically think. And perhaps you'll begin to change your own mind as a result. And also understand that this presentation, this discussion that I'm going to have, and this essay I'm going to read is not designed to make you comfortable. In fact, it's going to make a lot of people very uncomfortable, but it will make you think. Before I begin, I like to go through the three things that are necessary in order to understand the language system of racism and white supremacy. I call these the three C's. Those of my light bulbs who regularly join me in class know what they are by now, but I will continue to represent these and read these and define these for you. Okay? The first one is comprehension. Comprehension is very important because it is the essence of understanding what you're saying, being told, writing, or reading. It's the ability of your mind to form and craft imagery and concepts from words. Imagine that. Imagery and concepts from words. The next one is context. And context is the ability to understand the circumstances that form the setting for an event, a statement, or idea, and in terms through which it can be fully comprehended and assessed. It's the setting. What is the context? What is the setting? How is this framed? Last but not least, is connotation. Now, connotation is important because connotation is the feeling, the ability of the words to summon emotion, the idea or feeling that a word invokes in addition to its literal or primary meaning. Hold on 1 second while I turn off these. There we go. These messages, notations, and notifications. Again, connotation is the ability of the words to summon emotion, an idea or feeling that a word invokes in addition to its literal or primary meaning. Connotation is particularly important because it is the feeling of the words, the expressive part. It's the part of the words, sentences, and paragraphs from thought within a particular context that create the drama and cause you to react certain ways, like happy, sad, violent. That's connotation. Now, for purposes of this discussion, these are the definitions of race. Race as color, race as character, racism, white supremacy, and value that I will be using. Race is any one of the groups that humans are often divided into based on physical traits regarded as common among people of shared ancestry. Race as color is color used to distinguish a race of people. Race as character is character used to distinguish a race of people. And Black people in America, in the United States, are distinguished as both race as color and race as character. Racism. This is what this discussion is about. Understanding what racism is. Once you have the fundamental understanding of what racism is, then the other things kind of come together and you begin to understand, oh, okay, my behavior is born out of this and not this. Racism is the systematic subjugation within established institutions in the U.S. through structurally designed discrimination and denial of opportunity, equity, equality, and justice built into every institution in the U.S. to control the formerly enslaved and their descendants, meaning people like me, in perpetuity after the enslavement ended. White supremacism is the ideology using the color white and whiteness as a value and merit metric, meaning using color as a value measurement, where superiority and goodness aligns with the color white and the color black and blackness are aligned as bad or inferior, each having been assigned generations ago to skin pigmentation. This is important to understand, especially in with regard to this discussion that we're going to have today. Whiteness is the theory that skin pigment or the assignment of the color white to imply skin color grants that individual with certain natural rights and privileges. The indoctrinated perception is of complete sovereignty over and above anything else on the planet. So, whiteness and white supremacy can be interchanged in a discussion. Value is the desirability of a thing, often in respect of some properties such as usefulness or exchangeability, worth, merit, or importance. Keep those things in mind as I discuss this essay. I call it tentatively Racism 101. I haven't given it a title yet because I haven't uploaded it to Medium as a bona fide essay yet. But I definitely want to read it to you first. So you're getting it before even Medium gets it. So sit back, put on your thinking cap, and listen carefully. It appears there is always something missing within the many contradictions that white supremacism and racism present to the nation and the world, yet hidden within the normal, neutral, and natural experiences of everyday people to the point of non existence. Much like the minuscule particles only recognized inside the quantum realm, the kind that exists and does not exist at the same time. Such is the nature of white supremacism and racism. For Black people who experience white supremacism daily on a spectrum of vile micro and macro aggressions, and racism on its spectrum of denial and discrimination, and the white people who do not, this push pull examination within the realities of each is as mesmerizing as I imagine watching tiny particles dance in and out of existence, here, there, everywhere, and then simultaneously not. Over the generations, the subject of racism has been diluted and rendered into abstraction oblivion, so much so that the definitions provided by most dictionaries offer their readers opportunities to be racist no matter their race. Indeed, Merriam Webster, which touts itself as America's most trusted dictionary, defines racism as a belief that race is a fundamental determinant of traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. Did you hear that definition? Did it confuse the, was it is confusing AF? I'll read it again. This is Merriam Webster. Defines racism as a belief that race is a fundamental determinant of traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. So it's saying that this is what racism is. This apparent convolution of definitions takes the institutional aspects of an actual structurally based system completely out and relegates racism to a simple belief where differences in race, as in anyone with a race, if different, can produce an inherent. Inherent kind of means an inherited. What it actually means an inherited superiority of a particular race. Race, by definition, is the fundamental determinant of traits and capacities. Stated another way, race is any group that humans are often divided into based on physical traits regarded as common among people of shared ancestry. Remember that? Remember that? Race. That's race. So what they're doing is they are describing race. The other portion of the definition relates to white supremacism itself. Therefore, there are two definitions within the one, and neither explains racism. So, what is racism? As I explained to you before, racism. Let me see if I can find that for us. Yes, racism is fundamentally the systematic subjugation within established institutions in the U.S. through structurally designed discrimination and denial of equality, equity, opportunity, and justice built into every institution in the U.S. to control the formerly enslaved and their descendants in perpetuity after the enslavement ended. So, what then is the overarching premise behind the Merriam Webster definition? First, by relegating racism to a mere belief, remember, it says a belief. So, by relegating it to a mere belief, it can be believed or not. See how easy that is? If you render something to a belief, it can either be believed or not. It is open to debate about its very existence. It can exist and not exist at the same time, depending on who has the experience and who does not. The idea of anyone producing the outcome of inherent superiority over a particular race is lost on the reality of white supremacy and its actual ideology of superiority over everything on the planet, especially of the Black race, a race which incidentally was manufactured by them as well, using race as color. The fundamental determinant of traits and capacities are a misleading notion for those who created race as people using an assignment of color to skin pigments. Capacities notwithstanding, the opportunity for capacities other than what was defined for Black people generations ago became apparent after the subsequent overthrow of Reconstruction. Therefore, the Merriam Webster definition is a convoluting, misleading misrepresentation of racism using race and white supremacism as the definitions without actually defining racism at all. When Googled, Oxford Dictionary usually appears first as the go to definition. It states that racism is, now I want you to hear this, because this is the one that has people most confused. This is the one that has people the most confused. It states that racism is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism by individual, community, or institution against a person or people based on their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. And as you should know by from coming to my classes or or viewing some of my videos, I do have one that describes minority as more than just a numeric value, but when used as a noun to describe a person, they're talking about Black people. notwithstanding everything else, all of the other ethnicities that are around that are discriminated against today based on ethnicity. Uh, Minority, usually, when you hear the word minority, what usually comes to mind is black. And marginalized is the other one. Okay. So it says prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism by individual, community, or institution against a person or people based on their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group. They include ethnic. Typically, one that is a minority or marginalized, and the belief that different races possess distinct characteristics, abilities, or qualities, especially to distinguish them as inferior or superior to one another. Now, I want you to pay close attention. At the outset, this definition gives the term prejudiced equivalency with racism, which is not only misleading but a false equivalency. According to the same Oxford Dictionary, prejudice means a preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. Being prejudiced is one aspect of the idea of superiority, where Black people, for example, are prejudged as lazy and criminal by white people. Racism, on the other hand, is being arrested in the act of being prejudged. Racism is losing the promotion or not getting that mortgage in the act of being prejudged. The definition also includes discrimination, which is misleading when used with the other description, since discrimination is the only term in the definition that has to do with racism. Remember, racism is denial and discrimination. Furthermore, the only words within this broad definition of racism that are relevant are discrimination and people. And all of that wording and all of that word salad, the only words that are relevant to the definition of racism are discrimination and people. Again, any references to systemic, structural, and institutional discrimination based on the color black are absent. The definition also speaks more of white supremacism as a definition rather than racism. Of particular note, pun intended, the word particular is strategically placed into this and Merriam Webster's definitions for a reason. Without naming the quote, particular race, they are referring, they are referencing that they can produce specifics without being specific. Just like the quantum particles in physics, where particles exist without existing. In this definition, ethnicities are also included for good measure so as not to appear overly particular in specifying just which race is being pointed out as superior or inferior. So it basically is not ethnicitism, it's racism. But those definitions just don't go. They really don't. Now, listen to this. The University of Minnesota Sociology Department teaches that prejudice, I want you to hear this, they teach in their sociology department, they teach that prejudice and discrimination are often confused. So basically, what they're saying is, since discrimination is a fundamental aspect of racism, they're saying basically, I mean, since we know, the light bulbs know that discrimination, one of the pillars of racism is discrimination. So they're saying that prejudice and discrimination are often confused, but the basic difference between them is this: prejudice is attitude, prejudice is attitude, while discrimination is the behavior. Now, this is where they kind of go awry. More specifically, racial and ethnic prejudice refers to a set of negative attitudes, beliefs, and judgment about whole categories of people and about individual members of those categories because of their perceived race and or ethnicity. Now, they say here, a closely related concept is racism, or the belief that certain racial or ethnic groups are inferior to one's own. Now, we light bulbs know that the belief that certain racial or ethnic groups are inferior to one's own is what? White supremacism and whiteness, not racism. Racism is what is used to perpetuate that ideology. So, discrimination is a fundamental aspect of racism, and yet students are taught both prejudice and discrimination are separate from racism, where racism is described as a closely related concept. So, this negates the Oxford Dictionary version of racism on its face, because they come right out and say that prejudice and racism are not the same. Imagine that confusion. You're learning this in school, and then you look at the dictionary and it says it's prejudice. Racism is prejudice. It pops right up there. As soon as you Google racism, what happens? Oxford Dictionary pops up for me. First word, first word out the gate is prejudice. So people naturally think, well, racism is prejudice. The definition students are taught, however, is more akin to Merriam Webster's brand, or a theoretical concept based on the belief that anyone can be racist by virtue of thinking they are superior to another. Remember that. Remember the Webster Dictionary one says, all you basically have to do is think that you are superior and you are racist. That anybody can be racist by virtue of thinking they are superior to another. Of course, discrimination appears to be left out of the description of racism altogether that they're taught. So it's no stretch of any imagination to understand why people are confused about racism and what it is. Both definitions use a watered down version of the fallacious ideology of white supremacism to support those very definitions without saying that these are the definitions of white supremacy. Like, you won't find that in the dictionary describing that. I don't think. I haven't done that yet, and I will certainly do that after this class. But I think that white supremacy is always they always try to just assign that to the boot boys and the swastika foreheaded guys and the people who carry the battle flag of the Confederacy, and not the ones in the legislature and heads of CEOs of corporations and that sort. The question becomes why these definitions of racism would be relegated to a belief system allowing all people to be racist and not an actual running system structured specifically for the descendants of Africans who were enslaved by them generations ago. Why are they hiding history? I mean, this was history. This is it. I mean, say what you wanna, but racism was created specifically for the emancipated people after Reconstruction was overthrown, and some of it during Reconstruction, because they started immediately to create situations, laws, and regulations and covenants to deny and discriminate against these newly freed African descended people. So the question becomes why these definitions of racism would be relegated to a belief system, allowing all people to be racist and not an actual running system structured specifically for the descendants of Africans who were enslaved by them generations ago. They keep wanting to hide that fact. The question becomes why these definitions of racism would be used in the 21st century to hide the fact that Black people are still kept in an underclass caste structure based on the assignment of a color to skin pigment, ensuring the backhanded foundation of those definitions is secure. I wrote this as a comment to an article in Medium, and actually, this was the impetus for this entire essay, the inspiration, if you will, for this entire essay. It was a comment to an article that an individual wrote in Medium that I felt compelled to comment on because that article was very, very interesting. And so I wrote, there is an extremely important fact within white supremacism that demands there has never been and continues to be no mechanism in place to prop up the feigned ideology of their superiority over everything on the planet. For there to be a system in place to ensure they are dominant means they are really not supreme and have needed their brand of generational affirmative action, for lack of a better mocking description, for centuries. They simply will not admit there has always been a foot on the scale that placed them in the state of being white by assignment of skin color and as a measure of human value, supposedly superior to Black people. While some may admit to racism as simply interpersonal behavior, they will throw themselves onto the sword, they will throw themselves onto the sword of their victimhood rather than admit to a system of denial and discrimination of equality, equity, opportunity, and justice aimed at Black people, which is the only thing hiding their mediocrity. Now, evident through definitions provided by white people over the generations and taught even at the collegiate level mean there will never be accountability for creating racism to support their belief in their superiority. They will never admit to there being a system of discrimination and denial of equality, equity, opportunity, and justice against a particular group, that group being specifically Black people, where generations ago that group was assigned a specific color denoting and connoting evil and dirt. They will never admit to there being a system in place to ensure that the fallacy of their supremacy is based on their assignment of a color connoting and denoting purity, cleanliness, holiness that would be specific to their particular group. Finding out after all these generations that they are not special and not superior, but simply being used to create an image of superiority for those whose ancestors created the structures for themselves must be unnerving. So the definitions must stand for those who might just wonder whether they are being lied to, those who might just wake up. That's why, as long as we are not the ones defining the written terms, definitions, and conditions, there will always be misrepresentations of the language of race, racism, whiteness, and white supremacy. Therefore, it is incumbent upon those of us who understand the language to provide the unbleached truth of the definitions used to mislead and misrepresent us daily. And that concludes that essay. I hope you liked it. I hope that it meant something to you. I hope that it resonated with you. I see that I do have some people in the class today. Oh my goodness, it's a little more. Hey, there's Nunya. Hi, Nunya. I'm going to shout out some people now. Rosetta Brooks. Tanya. Hi, Tanya. You said, what are the, how about I'm going to show this? It says, what are your thoughts on controlling the narrative and the importance of that skill set in our community? Yes, for example, the Montgomery incident, given its location and context, what it has inspired, instead of a brawl, it was an uprising. Yes, yes, that yes, absolutely, yes. We uh yes. I can't. All I can say is yes. Salima, hi. Salima Rosetta Machete, hi. Eva, oh my goodness, I have people in class today, and I'm very happy about that. You know, Tanya, what you said there is speaks volumes. Yes, we should control our own narrative, and that's why I decided to break down those definitions, because I had an occasion to discuss this online with some people on a panel, and they were talking about prejudice and racism, and they were giving it equivalency, and I was trying to explain that, prejudice and racism are two different things. They are related, but they are not the same. And prejudice could be, you could use equivalency between bias and prejudice, but not racism, because racism is a system of denial and discrimination. Of course, it takes people to do that, and their behaviors are born out of what? What did we say? Born out of the ideology of white supremacism. And racism is that which ensures that that fallacy uh, remains intact in this country. Because as soon as that fallacy is gone, as soon as that fallacy is gone, there's no need for racism to exist. If equality existed, if equity existed, if opportunity and justice existed, real, true existed, then there would be no need for racism to exist. But because they have that fallacious ideology in their heads that has been uh, um, propagated and, as they say, inherent in their particular race, that is why they need that system, and they need for it to stay hidden, or they need for it to exist and not exist, like those quantum particles. Yep. So, hi, Ash Bash. How are you? How are you? I'm so happy that my light bulbs, my students are here today. And Deborah Davis, how are you? I hope that this essay um, cleared up some things for you. It is, and if it has, throw in a light bulb or two in the chat so that I can see that it has resonated for you, and that you become more aware of how this language can really misrepresent and mislead you into thinking one thing or another. Just understand that when you hear someone say racism is prejudice, you can say, no, it really isn't, because racism is a system. Prejudice is an attitude or belief. Prejudice is based on, it's an attitude or belief that's based on, or say prejudiced against. See, because you can be prejudiced against anything. Doesn't necessarily have to be a person or people. It just in racialized, within the racialized lexicon, it does mean bias against black people, or it has. I mean, it has expanded tremendously. And there's a reason why it has expanded tremendously. Why even the subject of racism has expanded tremendously, because they want to include everything, ethnicities, which is really just culture. Racism is not against a culture. Racism is against what they determined race was. So anyway, that's that. I don't know whether anybody wants to come up and discuss any of this, but I will put the I'm going to drop this down just in case anybody wants to come up and talk about it. Maybe you have a question that you want to put in, that you want to discuss on the panel, or maybe you want to put the question in, maybe you want to put the question in as a chat question. Eva says I made it to a live. Yeah. I don't have my classes that often, but I want to start having them a little more often, which means I have to write a little more often, which means I have to be a little more inspired than usual. Because I generally will. Hi. Oh, hi. Hi. O.I. Griffin or O.L. Griffin? Hey. Hey. How are you? How are you? So happy to see you here. Now, if you're just joining, that means that you most likely missed the essay, but that's okay because you can catch it in the replay. I'd like for you, if you haven't done so already, to please like this video. Apparently, that is a very important thing for YouTube. And subscribe if you haven't done so already. I am up to, I believe, 856 light bulbs. That means the world to me. That means the absolute world to me. That means there are 856 people who are tuning in and learning. And that's important. That's very important to me. It really means a lot to me. Now, I'm not going to stay on. If you don't have any questions, do remember to throw something in the comments. I do respond to comments. I always respond to comments after the fact. So if you watch this during the replay and you have a question or a comment, do not hesitate to put it in. I love when you engage, when you react, when you communicate with me, because if there's anything that might be unclear, I can get right back to you. So do put questions in the comments, and that includes Facebook as well. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. If you're on Facebook and you're not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe and remember to like the video. Well, if there is nothing else to be said, I will leave you now, and I'll be back as soon as I develop something else of interest. I will most certainly be back. Thank you all for coming, and I'll talk to you another time. Bye bye.